My fellow South Africans, Molweni, Goeiedag, Sanbonan, Dumelang, Abshane, Demasiari, Tobel. This year marks 25 years since we began observing a National Day of Reconciliation in democratic South Africa. It is a day on which we recall the injustices of our history. It is also a day when we affirm our collective responsibility to build a non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society. For much of our history, this day in our national calendar has been a symbol of division and conflict. Now, we observe this day as one nation. This should be a time when we commit ourselves to build bridges and celebrate the splendor of our diversity as displayed in our different languages, our cultures, our faiths, and our histories. This year, 2020, is one of the most challenging our young democracy has faced. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought great hardship and untold suffering to millions of our people. All South Africans, black and white, have come together to confront this grave threat. The support, the encouragement, and the solidarity extended to those in need has been a great inspiration to all of us. Perhaps not since the advent of democracy in 1994 have we stood together as a united nation, bound by empathy, compassion, and our common humanity. As much as the pandemic exposed the great economic divisions that exist between us, it has also shown once again that we are not the society that the apartheid system intended us to become. We are not a people who care and extend help only to a section of our nation. We are not a people who care only for some of our people and are not caring about others. During this time, it was you, the people of our beautiful country, South Africa, who donated to the Solidarity Fund. It was you who volunteered to help others who are in need. It was you who assisted with food parcels for the hungry. It was also you who came together to help our learners to continue their studies by volunteering as tutors. It was you, the people of South Africa, who encouraged each other to keep safe, to wear masks in public, and to observe the public health regulations. It was because of you that we have so far been able to withstand the worst of this pandemic. All these wonderful acts of solidarity and compassion were a display of a true and original Tumamina moment in practice. In the days, weeks, and months ahead, as we repair and rebuild our country, let us continue to draw on our deep reserves of kindness, empathy, compassion, and solidarity. Fellow South Africans, for the past 26 years, we have made much headway in overcoming the divisions brought upon us by our history. We see it every day in our communities, in our workplaces, in our schools, and on our television screens. Much as we continue to actively work to overcome the divisions in our society, deep and persistent challenges remain. We have seen racial tensions flare up in several parts of our country, polarizing communities and opening old wounds. What we have seen in Senegal, in the Free State, in Eldorado Park in Gauteng and in Brackenfell in Cape Town shows that the state of race relations in our country remains fragile. We may have come a long way from the days of institutionalized racism, but we are alive to the reality that for many, reconciliation is something they have yet to experience. This is not a situation that is unique to our country. During the course of this year, millions of people around the world stood up to confront racism that still infects many societies in many countries. Under the banner of Black Lives Matter, they spoke out, they marched, they demonstrated, and they wrote about the many ways in which Black people continue to be discriminated against and victimized. It is our hope and determination that this groundswell of activism will forever change the attitudes and practices that have sustained racism across the world. As South Africans, we have come out in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Having experienced one of the world's most brutal forms of institutionalized racism, and fully aware that racism continues in our own country in various different ways. As we work to bridge the racial divisions between the people of South Africa, we hope that our path to a non-racial society may serve as an example to others around the world. True reconciliation will not be possible unless we address the many ills in our own society. We cannot build a truly caring society so long as the country's majority live in conditions of poverty, inequality, and deprivation, while a minority exists in comfort and privilege. We cannot move forward with the process of meaningful reconciliation if policies around economic transformation, affirmative action, and land reform are resisted. We cannot build a society that enables the individual to better their life and realize their potential when resources meant for the benefit of the people are stolen by those who claim to be their representatives. So long as we do not overcome the poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment that affects this country's majority, reconciliation will forever remain out of our reach. The social conditions under which many people live is the single biggest obstacle to achieving a society rooted in equality and committed to social justice. So on this day, it is not enough to merely commit to advancing social cohesion and nation building. We must also ask ourselves what we can each do to advance social cohesion and nation building. We must ask ourselves what we can do and indeed what we must do as individuals, as leaders, and as a people to advance social justice, solidarity, and human rights in our homes, communities, workplaces, where we study, where we worship, and in all facets of our lives. We all have a responsibility to bring about social and economic transformation in our country. It is up to all social partners to drive the change we need and want to see this happening in our own country. In order for us to address poverty and inequality, businesses must support policies of redress. Our businesses must reflect their support for transformation through their hiring practices, through capacitating and skilling their staff, and in investing in communities in which they operate. They must make more opportunities available for young people, women, persons with disability, and other marginalized groups in our country. Labour must continue with its important mandate to protect and advance the rights of workers and work towards improving the industrial relations landscape. Farming organizations and landowners must support government's efforts towards land reform, which is a fundamental part of reconciliation. Those of us who have been elected by the people of our country to represent them and their interests as councillors, mayors, MECs, premiers, ministers, and as presidents, must rededicate ourselves to the service of our people. Let us be accountable to the people, respect public resources, and hold ourselves to the highest standards of ethics and morality. Fellow South Africans, we cannot achieve reconciliation for as long as the women of our country, who constitute half of our population, live in fear of gender-based violence. We must stand firm in our rejection of all forms of violence against women and children. We must all play our part in supporting survivors of gender-based violence and respect the rights of women and children in our families and in our communities. We must reject all forms of sexism, chauvinism, and patriarchy. As men, we must be integrally involved in this struggle because it is men who are the perpetrators. We should be ashamed that women and children are afraid of being in the company of unfamiliar men, of being followed home by men, and of being beaten up, harassed, abused, raped, or even killed by men. It is not women and girls who must change their behavior. It is men who must change. We have just concluded the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. Let us sustain our activism throughout the year. I call on all the men of South Africa to support the Holikani campaign of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, which seeks to promote positive masculinity and behavioral change. Fellow South Africans, it was the great South African freedom fighter, Neville Alexander, who used the metaphor of the Gharib, or generally known as the Orange River, to describe national identity in post-apartheid South Africa. Like this great river that flows for over 2,000 kilometers from the Drakensberg Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean, he wrote of how South African society can be described as the flow of many streams that form this river. The tributaries of this river carry the many identities that make up our people, be it by race, class, ethnicity, gender, or religion. Although these tributaries flow at different strengths and are of different sizes, they all eventually merge, flowing into the main stream of the Gharib River. Just as the Gharib River brings sustenance to the arid regions through which it flows, we must see our nation's unity as the water that nourishes our nation. Regardless of how we identify, whether on the basis of race, language, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, or class, we are all an integral part of the beautiful tapestry that makes up this great country. We may be Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaner, Khoisan, Sotho, Tsonga, Venda, Swati. We may be black, white, Indian, or colored. We may be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, or even atheist. We may be heterosexual or homosexual, gender conforming or gender non-conforming. We may be able-bodied or persons with disabilities. We may be men or women. We may be young or old. We may be rural dwellers or live in the cities, but we are all South Africans. We have come from a bitter past, but we must not let the divisions of the past define us. National pride is important, but it must be complemented by social justice. Without social justice, there can be no lasting peace. And unless all are able to lead lives of dignity, there can be no reconciliation and progress. We cannot diminish our past, nor can we forget it, but we look to the future with optimism and hope, for it is the future that matters most. Let us move forward together, for South Africa as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I wish you well on this day of reconciliation. May God bless South Africa and protect her people. I thank you.